The Council reconvened in Abuja, with President Bola Tinubu facing one of his most delicate diplomatic tests yet. Without naming the United States or Donald Trump, the president sought to project calm and confidence, linking Nigeria's oversubscribed $2.35 billion Eurobond to renewed global confidence in the country's economy, despite what he calls political headwinds.
Despite the political headwind and the fear of our people, we continue to engage with our partners. The success of the $2.3 billion bond, our subscription, oversubscribed, is the most at this stage.
He says Nigeria would continue to engage partners diplomatically while intensifying efforts to defeat terrorism and instability.
We are engaging the world diplomatically. I assure all of you that we will, defeat terrorism in this country. The task ahead is immense, but it's our resolve to move forward with unity and purpose, guided by renewed hope agenda to build a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient Nigeria.
Earlier, Finance Minister Wale Edun briefed the Council that the Eurobond attracted $13 billion in orders and oversubscription of 453%. He outlined the next phase of reforms to build a $1 trillion economy. After hours of deliberation, it emerged that the U.S. designation was discussed. The Minister of Information said the government is addressing legitimate concerns.
Genuine concerns raised. Now, have we had any discussions with the government of the United States? Yes. Channels have been opened. We prefer that this situation is being solved diplomatically, but there is no any panic mode here. We are responding responsibly, steadily, and in the interest of our country.
The Council also approved several infrastructure and urban development projects. The Works Ministry secured approval for 2 new contracts, including a 100-mile highway and reviews of ongoing projects.
And today we awarded, phase 2, section 2, and that is for 43 billion. And this entails a number of the underpasses to do it with concrete pavement, and also the flyovers that were constructed, the ramps were not constructed, and the adjoining roads. And that is that one.
Today, the Federal Council, as regards to the Federal Capital Territory, ratified the approval of the design and construction of residences of heads of courts. Again, the Federal Council approved the provision of water to the satellite towns of Karu, Karishiria, Orozo, and Buhari.
The Finance Minister announced new funding, including a $300 million World Bank credit for internally displaced persons in the North. Responding to questions on borrowing, he said the debts remain within limits and are targeted at productive ventures.
So it is to assist both the host community that is playing host to these camps, as well as those inside those camps. It's a World Bank IDA project, very low interest, about 3% IDA, World Bank, and IDA virtually free or 1% financing. The important issue of financing, of borrowing, and of net revenue, I will take together. It is a sign of success and investor confidence that we can raise funds according to our plans. When you look at the debt to GDP ratio, it is relatively low, well under 40%, well below those of even our peers, and even the guidance that the people like the multilateral development banks and so forth give.
Meanwhile, President Tinubu, during the cabinet meeting, swore in 2 new ministers. Dr. Bernard Doro from Plateau State, now overseeing Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction Ministry, and Dr. Kingsley Tochukwu Ude, Senior Advocate of Nigeria from Enugu State, takes charge of the Science, Innovation and Technology Ministry. Their appointments restore the Federal Executive Council to its full complement of 48 members. Adesoa Omorwan, Arise News.
Thank you, Adesua. Now, barely 1 week after President Donald Trump directed the U.S. military to prepare for possible action over claims of Christian genocide, the U.S. military has submitted contingency plans for potential strikes on Nigeria. The New York Times reports that the U.S. Africa Command has drawn up and sent its options to the Department of War this week upon the request of Secretary Pete Hegseth. Arise News Chief of Correspondence Ferdinand Duroha reports has more.
The military intervention plan is drawn up by the U.S. Africa Command, also known as AFRICOM, a military unit Donald Trump had earlier threatened to dismantle as part of a Pentagon downsizing effort. It includes 3 options: heavy, medium, and light. The New York Times quotes the heavy option presented by the command as the most forceful military response that the U.S. could take against Nigeria. It involves sending an aircraft carrier group to the Gulf of Guinea, off the Nigerian coast, and using fighter jets or long-range bombers to strike targets deep inside northern Nigeria. For the medium option, the command suggests using drone strikes against identified military camps, bases, convoys, and vehicles. The New York Times says the light option would center on partner-enabled operations with the U.S. military and the State Department supporting Nigerian government forces to target and neutralize terrorists responsible for attacks on civilians. Although AFRICOM says the goal is to strike Islamist militants in northern Nigeria and protect Christians from armed violence, critics are skeptical about the objectives and implementation. While the plans were designed to allow for a controlled escalation, the asymmetrical nature of Nigeria's conflicts presents a major challenge as terrorist elements often live within citizens, making it difficult for the military to fully engage. The situation is also more complicated due to the issue of proximity. Presently, the United States does not have an airbase in any neighboring country to Nigeria, after exiting its bases in Agadez and Niamey, both in Niger Republic. This reduces their options to bases in Southern Europe and Djibouti. Ferdinand Duroha, Arise News.
Air Staff Air Marshal Sunday Aneke has assured Nigerians that the Nigerian Air Force will prioritize the safety of civilians and prevent collateral damage during its ongoing operations to root out terrorists. Aneke gave the assurance on Thursday during his maiden meeting with branch chiefs, Air Force air officers commanding, and other senior officers at the NAF headquarters in Abuja. He says the directive aligns with the federal government's expectations for the military, adding that the Air Force will focus on operational efficiency, safety, and professionalism. Aneke says the strategic meeting was convened to assess the force's current posture, identify gaps, and review measures to enhance effectiveness.
Let me take this moment to assure Nigerians that the Nigerian Air Force will continue to work closely with sister services and other security agencies to root out terrorism, eliminate threats, and deny safe havens to all adversaries of our nation. Our joint efforts will remain relentless until peace and stability are restored in every corner of this great country. We will further strengthen civil-military relations by engaging communities, winning hearts and minds, and building trust. Our operations will be people-focused and respectful of the very citizens we are sworn to protect. Gentlemen, we have to take this as our priority. Protecting civilian lives and preventing collateral damage will remain a defining hallmark of our professionalism and operational discipline.
All right, very important statement there, Vimbai. Remember that in the last, under the last Air Force chief, there had been reports around bombings or bombs killing civilians in certain parts during some of their operation. So it's great to hear his assurance. But beyond that, first of all, it's a day of congratulations. Congratulations on your award received yesterday, TV Personality, TV Presenter of the Year. Congratulations, Bimbai. And of course, still celebrating Dr. Abati, who turned 60 today. There are implications.
But first, the big implications, the 60-year implications. Once we get those out of the way, then
we move on.
We can come with our own small implications.
All right. Well, there are implications of insecurity. As we see, we have been talking about it all through the week, and the story is not going anywhere as at yet. Yesterday, the president had his FEC meeting for the first time in 3 months, as Adiso Omoran reported, just as we saw a few minutes ago. Your take on all these stories this morning?
All right. I'll quickly begin with some of the economic takeaways from the FEC, because the other security issues, I think, belong in one group together. So, biggest takeaway from the FEC meeting is that the federal government is set to unveil what they're calling the next phase of their reforms, which is supposed to create a greater environment for investment. Some of this includes addressing some tariffs, deterrence to imports, fiscal transparency, and so forth, which I think are all commendable. But I think we can all agree that we've gotten to a stage where we kind of exhausted. We've got reform fatigue with macroeconomic reform, and now we want to see microeconomic reform. So a lot of us were anticipating hearing something about an industrial policy coming out of that FEC meeting, because what we really need right now is an increase in household incomes, number one, and a greater access to opportunities. Jobs is what people are looking forward to in the next phase of reforms. So that was a slight anticlimax for people like myself who are looking for something a little bit more tangible that will add money into our pockets. Now let's look at the bigger story today. The big story is, of course, we've heard from the president for the first time making his comments with regards to all that has been going on with threats from Donald Trump and so forth. And he made another commitment yet again to squash out terrorists and terrorism and insecurity in Nigeria. And of course, we know this is not the first time. I went all the way back to November of 2022 during the campaigns when he said that one of the key things on his agenda would be to squash out insecurity. And he said this, I quote him directly, "We shall continue the fight against insecurity by redefining our counterinsurgency doctrine and practice. Our response to terror, kidnapping, and violent criminality will be defined by the following elements." He said we shall enlist more people in the armed forces, security services, and the police. Our forces will be given better tactical communications, mobility, as well as improved aerial and ground surveillance capacity. Through these and other measures, we shall better identify, monitor, track, and defeat these evil groups where they are. They shall have no respite until they surrender or are utterly defeated. November 2022. Have we seen an increase in the armed forces, security services, and the police? Not yet. To give credit to this administration, we've seen the introduction of forest guards and so forth, but that campaign promise is yet to be fulfilled. Better tactical communications, mobility, and so forth. I think we can argue that the DSS has been playing a stronger role in providing intelligence. We're seeing a lot more action based off of intelligence. But beyond that, are we seeing any greater tactical, strategic surveillance and movement from our armed forces? Not yet. So we hope that, given that we're currently engaged in a diplomatic imbroglio with the United States, that the political will now exist to make these changes that need to be made so that there can be some sort of headway made in this fight against insecurity. Now let's look at the news coming from the New York Times that the Africa Command has already weighed up their option. First of all, I think that this should be taken with a pinch of salt. We know that Donald Trump is currently involved in litigation against the New York Times. He calls it the virtual mouthpiece for the radical left Democrat Party. He calls them fake news. He calls them, Donald Trump does not have a good relationship with the New York Times. So how likely is it that a representative of Donald Trump's government would have gone to the New York Times? Well, maybe it's an information leak. But I think we also need to be careful about the politics that is also being played in the United States and how Nigeria's issue can be used as bait in trying to get one over between the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. Very, very important for us to take it with a pinch of salt. Having said that, when you look at those options available, and now I connect it with the NAF strike and that commitment to say that there will be more accuracy with airstrikes. If the United States or any country whatsoever is to choose the route of airstrikes in Nigeria, I've spoken about this before and I reiterate that bombs don't discriminate, especially with the strategy that we currently see of asymmetric warfare. Why do I say this? These extremist groups like to engage in human shielding. What is human shielding? In Latin, they call it muena ex captivis, which means hiding behind captives. They hide behind civilians. They hide behind the vulnerable. We saw it in Gaza. We've seen it in medieval times during the Crusade Wars. Even the Romans and the Greeks used it as a strategy. So when we talk of airstrikes, it's a very dangerous strategy because these extremists have decided to hide behind vulnerable people. So this is why people like me denounce any international airstrike coming in as a solution. We've tried the non-kinetic approach. Unfortunately, we haven't had any success with it, but I think that we still need to revisit ways to solve this non-kinetically, even though it's looking like the kinetic approach is going to be critical in squashing out terrorism once and for all.
Once and for all, let's squash it out. Let's end the killings. Rufai, your take on these stories?
A couple of things. At first, I'd like to acknowledge what President Tinubu said, that we need to squash and fight insecurity. I think since this debate started, I think this is a valid point from President Tinubu, that we need to fight insecurity. But I don't want him just to end at the point of rhetoric. I want him to match it with action. By now, there should be a battle plan drawn up by the Nigerian government as regards what will action be, a renewed action. Because you see, when the Americans wanted us to invade Niger after the coup happened, Nigeria's battle plan was leaked by a certain journalist. We had a quick battle plan of what we wanted to do in Niger before that was stopped and people kicked against it because it would have brought monumental damage back to Nigeria owing to the cultural symbiosis between Nigeria and Niger. So by now, we should have a battle plan based on intelligence of what we want to do. We should also have a battle plan based on tracking terrorism financing, because these people cannot work without finance. And in tracking terrorism financing, apart from the work the NFRU will do, we should also see how we can infiltrate financial cells across the Sahel. Because see, those that help change money and give money to these criminals, you can find them in many parts of the African continent. Anywhere you have a land route, you can see them carry money with their camels and other materials, as well as arms.
You say pay card maintenance fee, not with OPay. Use OPay Verb card for 10% cashback. Fast and 100% successful. Download OPay now.
Plus arms. How do I know this? I know of somebody that has gotten on an African expedition before, and he told me that all he needed to do was to tell a money agent from Nigeria that he'll be passing through some African countries. And when he went through those African countries, the money agents will always send people that will come and give him local currency in that country. All he needed to do was to give. So there's an informal money financial chain across the African continent, apart from even the banking sector. The NFI will track transactions through the banks, but there's an informal money chain that we should also infiltrate and see how these terrorists are being financed. Thirdly, I'm happy that the Chief of Air Staff has said they will prioritize protection of citizens when they do that, their airstrikes, because that's also important. We had the case of Iran where a lot of people were killed in airstrikes. And we've also had people killed from airstrikes recently. Because we want to strike terrorists does not mean we should also kill our citizens. I accept that argument. As regards America, with due respect, I do not think because Trump is not in good terms with the New York Times, we should discountenance what New York Times said. Because there are people in American government that talk to every form of media in New York Times. Trump is also not in good terms with the CBSs of this world, but he goes there to hold interviews, despite the fact that he gloats on those platforms how he made them pay millions of dollars in the course, and which we have pretty much been doing in terms of training and reconnaissance information sharing. The two other ones, medium and heavy, will not work. What is on medium? Probably set up a base around here or use a long-range drones. America has something called the Reaper that can stay in the air for a while. Use those drones, hover around. But those things have known not to be effective because the best you would just do is you would do targeted airstrikes. But after airstrikes, you need a ground troop force that can come and do a clearance operation after airstrikes. So that's not going to work. And if America or Trump thinks they can come and do that and to show that they've performed airstrike just like they are doing in Venezuela, it's a joke. By the way, based on what is happening in Venezuela as we speak, even the Congress is beginning to sanction Trump and say he has to go through them before he orders another airstrike. The third one, which is the heavy approach, is what they're saying that they will probably lodge aircraft carriers in the Gulf of Guinea, fly out of the Gulf of Guinea, come into our territorial waters. All of that will not also work. The best bet will be the light approach, which the Nigerian government has also said that if they want to give us some support, they can give. For me, even if we are doing the light approach, is an indictment on Nigeria. It just shows that leadership has not worked. I feel with the strength of this our military that fought over 6 different rebel groups between Sierra Leone and Liberia, we should be able to get the work done effectively. It's just that leadership is missing to a large extent. I wish Nigeria well, and I hope we're able to surmount insecurity and stop the killing.
Yes. We hope that we are able to surmount the insecurity and stop the killings. I would dare say that take or discountenance President Trump's threat at your own peril. Yes, we might say that, oh, he speaks a lot and he's known to yo-yo on his policies. But if you look at his antecedents and going by that New York Post report that a military action, a draft action plan is in the works, then you would know that when Trump speaks, especially speaking about going into another country, most likely he has made up his mind, he's concluded, and he's just giving notice. It's only a matter of time. I had the opportunity to also just get a feel from military, and the truth is that there's an expectation of that happening. However, how does Nigeria then manage this? And when I talk about this, I talk about Iran. By the time he had said it, by the next day was in Iran with military intervention. You look at what is going on with South America, the war against the fight against military action against drugs. He's gone ahead and he's done it. With Gaza, the war in Gaza, Israel's intervention, he spoke and he went ahead and he did it. So it's very likely and almost certain that as he has spoken with regards to military action in Nigeria, it will happen. What we call is a consolidation of efforts between the U.S. military and the Nigerian government. Now, the advantage of the military, of the U.S. military, is number one, they have the capacity. Well, first of all, they know where the people are. They know where they are hiding. They already have identified their targets, and they have the capacity to go on. What has been argued again and again as to the reason why Nigeria perhaps has not been able to contain terrorism despite successive governments increasing the budgets on security and putting, making all the efforts and saying the right rhetorics around defeating terrorism is the fact that there's a lack of capacity and in some instances a lack of political will. In fact, to the credit of the Tinubu administration, it is that in the past administration we had a leader who almost didn't care about what was going on. Almost didn't do anything with regards to pushing back on terrorism. We saw terrorism almost take on a life of its own during the last administration. With this administration, the Tinubu government has tried, like Vimba, you already identified that during his campaign speech, he had talked about pushing back on terrorism. He had spoken very heavily on security, and in many instances, we saw some progress being made in that area. However, it wasn't anywhere near enough. And that is why, instead of closing the doors and not opening the channels of communication, let Nigeria see how we can work with the American government to ensure that we do not buy into this false narrative of them coming to as a coy to change a government or to bomb Nigeria or to declare war on Nigeria, but a war on the terrorists who have been causing havoc on Nigerians, especially, well, as the American government has said, on Christians. Now, let me even open this conversation around Christian genocide, because a number of people have been speaking for, against, it is just an incident of terrorism, insecurity in the country, Nigerians are being killed. And they're absolutely correct. However, when you look at the terrorist groups and their foundation, many of them have been touted as Islamic terrorist groups. And when they attack, usually their targets are Christians or moderate Muslims. You can look at their trajectory, you can look at their history. And so for people who do not agree with their faith, that is one of the first things that they do. And that's why you can understand why a number of Christians in the north and in the middle belt have complained that many of their community members have been killed. And so there's a case for that. The other part of it is that the soft side, the silent war that we're not even talking about, is how some state governments have perpetuated the lack of religious freedom for some Christians in those states. When you speak to some people in those regions, I had the opportunity to speak to some religious leaders, some people, just to get a sense of what's happening there. Beyond the killings is also the preventing of them to practice their religion and their faith freely, as guaranteed by the Constitution in Section 38. I say this because the rhetoric, or what the government has been saying, is that, the Constitution is backed, religious freedom is backed by the Constitution, and very well so. But what we often talk about is that there's one thing for a constitutional provision, there's another for the implementation and the will to actually enforce this directive. So the question I'll ask is, in these areas, do Christians feel free enough to practice their religion? The reason I ask is that this unfortunate incident where the U.S. has threatened military intervention or invasion in Nigeria has given us an opportunity to actually right the wrong that has happened for so many years, and we've looked away. For too many years, we have talked about killings like that of Deborah Solomon. Till today, no single person has been arraigned or has brought to book for that. We saw their faces right on screen. They don't even hide it anymore. They do it brazenly. How can we say that we guarantee religious freedom by the Constitution when we see people killed because of a lack of belief, a lack of alignment with a particular religious faith? These are the conversations we should be having. So while we're talking about, yes, military intervention, the US coming in, is there a case for this? Can we finally fix our problems? Can we work with the American government? Because at the end of the day, what they will come to do is to address the target. But the Nigerian military has the responsibility to mop up and finish the work. Because when this happens, a number of these terrorists will find escape routes. A number of these terrorist financiers will find a way to escape. It is now the onus will now be on the Nigerian government to ensure that the work that will be started by the American government will be finished by them. Yes, we talk about the strength of our military. Yes, we talk about the fact that if there's a political will, we can indeed defeat terrorism. Yes, we talk about the fact that we need support because we do not have the capacity for it. But I believe that we can do this with the American government, because whether I like it or not, I believe very strongly that Donald Trump was not joking, the American government isn't joking, and Nigeria should find a way to open communication channels to ensure that they work with the American government to sort this problem once and for all.
Ayo, let's not forget that a presidential candidate deleted his own tweet that he made about Deborah.
Yes, so
that is so loud.
Yes, let's have conversation on religious freedom. Let's not bury our head in the sand anymore.